Ray at Drop and Gold Tarot. I am here today to do a video for Jenny. So I had my niece called me, or actually texted me the other day, and said she picked up her first Oracle deck and she had a lot of questions. And she'd gone to my YouTube channel to see if I had a tutorial, and I did not. So I told her I would film one. So she sent me a bunch of questions, and those are the questions I'm going to answer today. So this is really broad in some senses, and then it's going to be narrow in others. And you can see I just got a mess of decks behind me. At some point I'll go top down and we'll talk about some specific decks. Let's see if I can talk. But first I want to answer some basic questions that Jenny had. So I'm looking over here because I'm looking at the questions that she sent me. So first question was, what is the difference between the two different decks? So I guess I'm assuming that you're talking about tarot and oracle, because I know that you bought an oracle deck. So tarot is a system that consists of 78 cards. There is 22 major arcana cards, and then there are 4 suits in the minors, kind of thinking about like playing cards, how there's like hearts, diamonds. So there's 4 suits and they do correspond with those. And in those suits, there's ace through 10, and then 4 court cards: page, knight, queen, king. Some people name them different things. Sometimes the suits are called cups or chalices or water, or I'm trying to think of other things that I have. We'll see some more examples, I think, in the decks that I pulled. Another suit is pentacles. Some people call it coins. Another suit is swords, air. I think I have a deck that calls it birds. And the last suit is wands or rods. I have a deck that calls it rods. I've seen it staves before. So, but and that corresponds with fire for most decks. Some decks will switch the correspondences between swords and wands. Swords is usually air, wands is usually fire, but I do have a deck that switches them. So, in the tarot cards, there are 3 major systems. There is the Rider-Waite-Smith. There is the Thoth. Some people call it Thoth. I say Thoth. And there is Tarot de Marseille. I don't work with Tarot de Marseille. I don't know a lot about it. I don't know. It still has the majors and the minors. The minors are pips. We'll talk about what pips are and show you some examples of pips later. But I think, and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong and you're watching, put it in the comments below and correct me. But I believe Tarot de Marseille does more with numerology. And you can read these decks both ways. So like, there's decks that take a little bit of inspiration from one system and a little bit from another. There are tarot decks that kind of do a little bit of their own thing, but most common are those 3 systems. And I'd say the Rider-Waite-Smith, and you'll see it RWS abbreviated places, is one of the most common. A lot of other decks are based on that system. They may not use the exact same pictures, exact same images, but a lot of them are based on that system. So that's tarot. So if I have a tarot deck that's based in the RWS, and I've learned RWS, then I can read any tarot deck that's based on that system, even though the images and the pictures and the artistry is different. So, and the artist may have included other things to kind of add to it, but I can read it. I can pick up any RWS deck and read it. I could actually pick up a Tarot Marseille, de Marseille deck and read it as an RWS if I wanted to. I could. There might be people who would have a fit with that, but I could do it. So that is tarot. Once you've learned tarot, it doesn't matter which pretty deck you have, you can read it. Some people say they have a hard time connecting to different decks. I did just put a deck up for sale that I wouldn't say I had a hard time reading. I could read it just fine. It just annoyed me because the keywords were very one-dimensional, and I think there's more than that to every card. So seeing the keywords as I was reading was really distracting. I mean, I could do it, but I wasn't enjoying it. And if I'm not going to enjoy it, then why bother? So that is tarot. Oracle is a whole other thing that really doesn't have a great definition because they vary depending upon the oracle deck. There is no standard number of cards, there's no standard suits, there's no standard way to use it. It is a divination deck, and it's up to whoever created it to decide how they wanted to create it. And it's up to whoever buys it to decide how they want to use it. And I do have some examples, some different examples of those and different ways that I use them, because I do know that you picked up an oracle deck. So, so oracles are kind of a different thing. You can't just learn one oracle deck and know how to read every oracle deck. They're all their own individual thing. So where math is math in every language, so tarot is kind of like that, or math is math. And if you have a math problem and you speak a different language, you could still pick up that math problem and probably do it. Oracle is more like different languages. And so you have to learn each oracle card's different language in order to be able to read it. So yeah, I kind of like that. There are other cards, divination systems besides tarot and oracle. The only other one that I do is Lenormand. And it's its own thing. It reads a different way than either of those do. But once you learn Lenormand, you can read any Lenormand deck, no matter what the pictures or what the artist decided to put on it, the same way you could with tarot. Some people do Kipper. I don't know a thing about Kipper. I've never looked at a Kipper deck. I don't know. I know it's out there. That's all I know about Kipper. So those are the basics between tarot and oracle. And I will show some examples. We'll go top down in a little while and I'll show some examples. I'm trying to get back to the questions, see if there's any other questions I should be answering face to face first. Do you need to set your intentions using cards? I do. I think about what it is I want an answer for, or I think about a problem that I need guidance with, or I think about a question, or I have used, set the intention of I don't have a specific question, just I'm bothered right now and I need more clarity. And that's my intention. But I always set an intention when I'm shuffling. Does everybody? I don't know. Let me know below if you do. I think it's a fairly common practice, but one of the things I have to say about divination or anything to do with magic or witchcraft or however you want to label it, is that as long as you are doing it your way and you find that you're getting consistent, correct answers, then that's the right way to do it. You have to do this, you have to do that. I've heard so many things. You have to, and we'll talk about this. I think this is one of the things she asked. Like, she asked me, do I have to cleanse my deck before I use it? No, you don't have to. I used to. I don't anymore. I started having too many decks coming in. Didn't have time for that. I just started cracking them open and using them. And you know what? I found out that they worked just as well for me. But if you like the ritual of doing that, then go ahead. I've seen people say, oh, you have to sleep with your deck. You have to, when I first got my first tarot deck in the 1980s, it was, you had to wrap it in silk and then put it in a wood box. And there's like, some people are like, oh, don't let anybody else touch your cards. And other people are like, oh, I let other people shuffle my cards. So really it's like, you do you, boo. Like whatever works for you. If you are a germaphobe or you have like a big bubble and you don't like people in your space, you don't want people touching your cards, then tell people they can't touch your cards. If you are a person who feels like somebody else's energy rubs off on your cards and you don't want them touching them, then that's your rule and that's cool. I do let other people touch my cards. I do feel like I can sense energy on my cards if they have been touched with intention from somebody. So I don't just like pass them around in a public space. But if I'm reading for somebody else, I do like that person to do at least a couple of shuffles or split the deck and put it back up, just so their energy gets in the deck. I feel like I get better readings that way. So that's just a personal thing for me. So you do it however you want to do it. So you want to sleep with your deck, sleep with your deck. If you want to put crystals on your deck, then put crystals on your deck. If you want to match every tarot deck with an oracle deck, great. I don't, you can. You can do it however you want to do it. That is the best thing about this path, is that there is no one like person in charge that's telling you you have to do it this way, or you're going to hell, or you're doing it wrong, or you're going to get kicked out, or whatever. It's your practice. You do it how you want to do it. Do I need to use tarot cards that originated from the founder to understand them? I'm not sure. No, because the tarot cards were originated from the Italians playing a gambling game. So no, I don't know. Yeah, no, you don't have to use, and I'm assuming that question comes from somebody said you had to start with a Rider-Waite Smith deck, or you had to start with a Thoth, like a Crowley Thoth deck, because they're originators of those decks. But no, you don't have to. You start with whatever deck you want. Now, there are some decks that are easier to start with than others, but if you are determined, you can start with any deck you want. Let's see, that's a journaling. Let me answer that in a minute. Journaling, I'll try to answer all the journaling questions like together in a group. Should you light a white candle? Again, personal preference. Sometimes I light candles when I almost always light a candle when I'm meditating. Sometimes I light a candle when I'm journaling or using my cards. Sometimes I don't. To be honest, sometimes it depends upon how cluttered I am back here. If I feel like I'm going to have room for that flame without catching something on fire or not. So personal preference. When I'm doing spells and rituals, I always use candles, and I do match my color candle with how I see those colors. But you don't have to. You do you. Let's see. Do you use crystals or runes when drawing cards? If so, how do you incorporate them? Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I rarely use runes when I'm doing cards because runes are still, I'm still very much a beginner at. So when I do runes, they are their own thing. I have to learn them separately before I could do anything else. I know other people do, and I think they do fabulous. I don't. I won't say I won't ever, but I do have to like get my runes down first. And it has been something I've just kind of like started dabbling, and then life got busy and I pulled back, and I just went back to things that I knew how to do because I could do them without having to study. And then I've dabbled, and then I pulled back, you know what I mean? So not great with the runes yet. So I don't do runes, but I do often use crystals. You don't have to. If I'm out and about, I don't. And I usually carry a deck of cards with me. And so, but saying that, often when I'm out and about, I still usually have crystals. I always have crystals on. What I'm talking about. I have a anklet that has crystals in it that is tied on my leg, and it's always on. So I always have some crystal with me. Usually if I'm leaving the house, I have my black tourmaline on my necklace. If I'm not working, I'll have my turquoise on. I'll put other, so I usually have crystals around. I have lots of crystals on my desk. I don't know if you can kind of see, and I'll pull out whatever one matches my mood for the day. I was going to say my intention, but it doesn't always match my intention. Sometimes it matches my mood. More often than not, I'll pull out crystals for protection, because that usually matches my mood. If I'm pulling cards for me, I'm feeling like I'm needing something. But if I'm needing something for like self-worth, I may pull out a rose quartz. If I'm needing something for clarity, I might grab a clear quartz crystal. If I'm looking for inspiration, I may grab moldavite or a lapis lazuli. So different things for different things. See, everything is, I feel like everything's like, well, that depends upon the circumstances, because it really does for me. All right. Another question that Jenny had was, oh, she asked me how I use crystals. Let me go back to that. How do I use crystals? I usually use crystals just by setting them out and having them kind of in the field of the reading. That's normally how I use them. Let's see. Do your spirit guides teach you stuff or talk to you about the cards? So I hear a lot of people say that they do. And I think a lot of that probably depends upon your belief window. I don't know that I see the world anymore through the belief window of spirit guides or a god or goddesses. At this time, and that could change because how I've seen the world has changed so many times throughout my lifetime, and I'm willing for that to evolve again. But at this point in time, I kind of see the world as a web of energy that's interconnected, because things that happen here influence things that happen over there. And so somehow that energy has to have been released or reabsorbed or traveled or moved. So I see it as a web of energy. So I believe in like connecting to that web of energy and being able to pick up things from that web of energy. So I don't see it as spirit guides. I don't see it as defined people. I see it as more of a larger consciousness of everybody in the world. I do believe tarot helps connect me to that. I believe meditation helps connect me to that. I believe ritual helps connect me to that. Setting intentions, doing things intentionally. I don't necessarily see this as magic. Like, for me, it's not like Harry Potter. It is more like, how do I say? It's more like when people used to think that lightning was from God and he was displeased. And then the science caught up and we realized it was the way the molecules moved. I believe the same thing about energy and magic. I believe that there's probably a science behind it that we don't understand yet. Do I think people can do incredible things with their mind when they train their mind to do it? Absolutely, I believe that. But I think probably most people have that ability. They just haven't focused and razored in on it. And I do think that if we turned that into a science, that we would find the science behind it. That's me. I am a very science-based person. Yeah. And so I think science someday will have the capability to prove more things that people call magic now as science, just like they have in the past. So do I believe cards connect me? Tarot connects me? Oracle cards connect me? Yes, I believe they connect me to that energy and they activate a part of my brain that I'm not normally using. And I believe the more often I do that, the more that part of my brain becomes active when I'm not trying to consciously connect into it. I believe it heightens my intuition because I believe there's a part of your brain that is ready to tap into the energy around you. And I think that's what intuition is. And I think that they called it women's intuition for the longest time because women were so subservient to the patriarchy, to men, that they had to use their powers of observation and feeling the energy of the room in order to keep them safe. And I believe that they developed that part of their brain in order to do that. And I think that they used those powers of observation and feeling energy and watching people and how they respond and kind of learning how to interact with different people to get a more favorable response as a protective thing. So, and I think they taught that to their daughters so that their daughters would have whatever skills that they could use to protect themselves in a world run by men. So I think that's where women's intuition comes from. And I think the more that you use that, the more you develop it. I think it's kind of like common sense. The more you use it, the more you develop it. So, so I do think that. I think that when I can connect into that greater consciousness, that I'm able to see things from a different perspective, and that teaches me a lot when I can step out of seeing it just from my own experiences and my own worldview. So is that a way of saying the spirit guides teach me things? For some people, that might be how it feels to them. They may have beliefs in higher powers and spirit guides. And for me, what somebody feels like that might feel like what I described and how it feels to me. So I think it really depends upon your belief window and whatever is the beliefs that are supporting your happiness and you being the best person you can be without overwhelming guilt and shame. Let's see. We'll talk about the differences between decks and deck names. Okay, I think before we go top down, there's just one last question. And do I answer it now or do I wait to the end? Because I think this is a good question. I'm going to circle back to this. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to circle back to this. After I do top down, maybe we'll come back and we will do more face. And I'll answer this last question because I really like this one. Okay, so I'm going to turn the camera and I'm going to go top down and answer a few more questions about tarot, oracle, some differences that Jenny was asking me about, and how I use them in my practice and in my journaling and how I journal. So if you're interested in that, stick with me. All right. The next question that was asked was, what are the differences between different tarot decks or name? So Jenny has seen the Fountain Tarot, the Druidcraft Tarot, the Wild Unknown Tarot, Morgan Greer Tarot, and Centennial Smiths-Waite Tarot. So what are the differences between those decks? The artwork. In the simplest terms, it's the artwork. So I actually don't own a traditional RWS deck with Pamela Coleman Smith's artwork on it. Don't own one. The closest things I have to that would be This Might Hurt and the Aquarian Tarot. Now, the Aquarian Tarot is the first deck that I ever had. It was the deck that I learned on. Am I in frame? I hope I am. Sometimes I use my candles more to delineate where my camera is. There we go. Okay, so if you were to look through Rider-Waite Smith type decks, they often depict very similar, if not the same, scenes. So I really should have, well, I've got some out so you can see them, but these decks, I could use these decks interchangeably. The cards would mean the same thing. A Six of Cups would mean the same thing on this deck as it would mean on this deck. So the difference is the art style between those decks that you have asked about. Some people will tell you have to start with a Rider-Waite Smith deck. They'll swear by it because there is symbology that Pamela Coleman Smith or Pamela Coleman, painted into the pictures to mean specific things. But a lot of artists will pick up those symbols and put them in their own decks also. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of cards, same card, different decks, so we can kind of get the feel of it. So an RWS, a traditional RWS deck was fully scenic. So every card had a scene that had symbology, whether it was the colors or the mountains or the water running through it or the way the cups were placed and those sorts of things. They all had meaning that adds meaning to the card when you know all the meanings. And those are called scenic cards. And so those are cards like this one is scenic. This is scenic. This is scenic. I have a couple other scenic cards here. This one is scenic. This one is scenic. And this one is scenic. And so you can see very similar things. 2 swords in each of them. Well, except for in this one, doesn't have swords. But you still have the same kind of feel to it. So here they're blindfolded. This one they chose, the artist chose not to blindfold, but she still has the 2 swords that are crossed, much like the original Rider-Waite Smith has the 2 swords crossed with somebody with a blindfold on. Here you can see the swords are crossed, but you can't see the arms. That's okay. Here she's blindfolded and she's throwing the swords blindly, which kind of, you know, talks to the meaning in a slightly different, nuanced way. And here the creator and artist has renamed the sword suit the dream suit. So it's still an air suit, you still kind of have the same feeling where she's blindfolded and her arm is crossed and still having to, you know, blindly make the choices kind of thing. So they have a very similar feel. You could read them all with a standard definition of the Two of Swords with like keywords that you knew, or you could go off the standard definition and then kind of look into the card for some extra nuances. That's called reading intuitively. When you do things like that, when you're looking into the card and going, oh, so there's an example. These are all Two of Swords. You could use these decks interchangeably, whichever one you looked at and you said, oh, well, because of what's going on in the picture, I can see the meaning that's attributed to this card better. Now, these are scenic decks, scenic minors, because these are all minor cards. This is a pip deck. These are pip decks. So although the majors are scenic, the minors are what we call pips. Some pip decks vary. In a Marseille deck, the swords are curved and they're always placed in the same arrangement. So none of these are Marseille decks. So they are, for simplicity's sake, because they liked the look, they didn't want the clutter, whatever reason that the creator decided, they did not put full scenes on these minor cards. So some of them still have some more hints than others. You still have the blindfold here. Here we're wrapped up instead of a blindfold. This deck puts extra colors into it to emphasize chakras. You know, so the creators put their own little spin that for an extra thing. If you don't know chakras, you don't have to read chakras into it. If you do know chakras and you know, oh, this has to do with matters of the heart because it's green, you know, then that's something that you can add into the deck, but you don't have to. You can just read it plain. Some people don't like to read with pips. Pips are sometimes harder to read with when you're first learning because there's not as many clues as to like the little nuances and things to pick up as there is with a full scenic deck. But still, once you learn it, can be used interchangeably. So that's basically the difference between decks is aesthetics. That's my point. It's aesthetics. It's what you like. Now, when she talks about a person must have been asking you questions. A lady talked to you about being other cards in the deck. Well, there's two possibilities. One is they could have renamed the suits, like I talked about earlier. So this deck, the Blood Moon Tarot, has renamed all of the suits. So instead of pentacles, we have honey. Instead of rods, we have skins. Instead of chalices, we have songs. Instead of swords, we have dreams. If that makes sense to you, some people have a hard time converting that in their brain. But I think this artist gave plenty of clues that dreams, there's always these sharp things in the dreams. The color's very blue, which I associate with swords and dreams, so that works for me. The cards here, you can see flames, so I do think wands, fire. The suit here has a lot of green tones, so I do think earth and pentacles. So for me, this deck totally works. For some people, that might be more difficult. It might not work so well. So some people don't like decks that change the names of the suits. There are decks, and I was just thinking about this as I was recording. I didn't get this deck out yet. There are decks that actually go by air. and they changed names of majors and minor arcana cards. So rather than calling the court cards Page, Knight, Queen, Kings, this one uses like Priestess, Shaman. No, Shaman is something different than Craftsman. They use Craftsman, and gosh, how many of my decks? Has somebody else been using my decks? They're all not in the correct direction. So they renamed the court cards. They named, so Craftsman, Witch, Goddess are some of the names. And then they renamed the majors. And then they did the majors backwards. And so they're numbered differently than what they would be in a Rider-Waite-Smith. And so you can, for Messenger, they've got Messenger instead of Page. So for some people, that's too much. It makes it too hard for them to work with that deck. Because World is usually your card 21, because the Fool is 0. So there's 22 majors, Fool being 0, and then 1 through 21. And most decks of World is card number 21. Here is card number 1. If you look at that, it's going to throw you off. If you just look at it as a World card, though, you just read it like a World card. The fact that the creator put it in the opposite order, she did for a specific reason, and I like it. But it doesn't change the fact that she changed the number on the card doesn't change the way I read the World card. Does that make sense? I hope so. So, and she's actually using earth, fire, air, and water instead of cups, wands, pentacles. So, I mean, it's a difference in how the cards are done. And I think when you're new, some of that can throw you off. But after you've been working with tarot for a while, it becomes a personal preference. It doesn't have to throw you off. But if you are a traditionalist and you don't want to deal with it, some people just don't like it. And that's okay. Because, you know, you're spending your money on it. You're spending your time on it. And you should have a deck that you like to use. So when they're talking about different names, that's it. Talking about extra cards. That was another question that Jenny had. The lady told her about extra cards in a deck. So some decks will have extra cards in the way of, like this deck. This deck had choices. They had 3 cards. Some of them are buried in here, but they had 2 different devil cards, and you could choose which. I know, I hope that's not glaring. I know that these are cold stamped, and sometimes they have a hard time showing up. Oh no, they're good. So, so in this deck, there was 3 cards that had 2 choices, and I basically went through the deck and picked between the 2 that I liked, and I had picked this one to stay in the deck. And so these were 3 cards that I pulled out that I decided to use the alternative cards instead. I keep them with the deck, but I just kind of put the guidebook between them and the rest of the deck so that they don't get shuffled in, so I don't end up having 2 devils, 2 emperors. And so you can mean that by having extra cards. There's extra cards to choose from. The other thing that you can mean by extra cards are some decks have just extra cards that come with them. This one actually had extra Hierophant. You could choose your Hierophant too. But this one just has extra cards. You can read them like an oracle deck. You could read them separately and pair it with your tarot. Or you could read, you could mix them into your deck and see if they come up. And you could memorize them. When they have extra cards like this, most often they will give you what the meaning for those extra cards are. I rarely, if ever, mix my extra cards into my deck while I'm doing tarot readings. I do have one deck that I have made a different choice on where I do have them mixed in, but rare is that, because when I pull my tarot cards, I want to just be able to read them. And if I have these extra cards in, I don't know what the creator meant by them. They don't necessarily fit into the scope of how I read. So I usually leave them out, and I may pull them as an oracle separately. That's me. So that's what I can think about for extra cards. It's gotten quite popular with independent made decks to have one extra card, and they call it like the Happy Squirrel card, or it's a unique card, unique to the deck, often unique to that printing of the deck. I think collector-wise, it probably increases the value of that deck, especially if they do a different squirrel card in different editions, or they only do it in the first edition and they don't continue to do it, that sort of thing. So it has a collectability. It's not necessary to read with, not needed. So that answers that, hopefully. Let's see. I'm just looking through the list again. Okay, so next question is, why does each deck or oracle cards have different meanings? So I think we've kind of talked about that. With tarot, each card should have the same or similar meanings if you're sticking in the same system. So all the decks so far that I have shown you are all in that Rider-Waite Smith area. So I would read all of these decks exactly the same. So these cards don't have different meanings for me. So I can use them all interchangeably because they follow a system. Tarot is a system. If you were, we'll just leave it there. Tarot is a system. If you follow one of the specific systems in tarot, you can read all of those cards the same. Let me clean up and we'll talk about oracle decks. Okay, now we're back and we're going to talk about oracle decks. And I just got out a few decks so I can talk about them in general. So oracle does not follow a specific system like tarot does. So it's still a system of divination. It can be used in spreads or one card pulls. It can be used to help you journal or do inner work, shadow work, child work, ancestor work, predict the future, help you find lost things, help you answer questions, help you get to know yourself and what you're worried about, and help you get out of negative patterns. All those things. It can do all those things that tarot does. But it doesn't have a specific system. So oracle decks, you can have, I think like the least I've seen is like 30 cards, 36 cards. I'm just trying to look kind of through here. This one's 55 cards. I don't even know if they all say. This one's 44. I don't know if it says how many are in. This is 60. So they have different amounts of cards, and they have different intentions, I think, from the creators. So different things I use my decks for. I have specific decks I use for specific things. So my Fairy Enchantment Oracle, if I can, it even has thumb holes and I still can't. I'm still struggling here. It's been on the shelf for a while. I use this deck for spell work because I have the different fairies on the front The book is great about giving information and backstories about them. But on the back, there's runes to go with it, which I like. Like I said, I'm not proficient in runes, but there is runes. But there's also words and items that you could use in ritual to help you. So you can use this deck by making a sentence. Like, I would like to I'd like to achieve boundless, and I'd use boundless here, success. So I could pull these 3 cards to do a ritual with achieving boundless success. I could, for instance, I could copy these runes onto a piece of paper or onto a bay leaf, which I could burn during ritual. I could take items from each of here to put on my altar or to use within my ritual. Like, I could take some juniper and burn some juniper. I could have red calcite on the altar while I was doing it. I could face south. You know what I mean? I could take bits and pieces of these cards to use to perform a ritual with specific intentions. Before I would do that, I would have picked what I wanted. I would have flipped them over. I would have read in the grimoire information about each of these fairies, what they embody, what their gifts are, what their backstory is, so I could ponder on that. And that would help me create the words or the sequence or how I went about performing the ritual. And then I would look for the hints of things to include physically. I have many cards that have full moons on them. I could place that on the altar. I could grab an iron spike or even a nail made of iron. I could draw a picture of a bull. I could grab a branch from the yard. I could use ash in a way. I could perform it on summer solstice, or I could, one of them I could perform under the full moon, or here it says dawn, I could perform at dawn, depending upon which part of the sentence, word, ritual I wanted to bring out. It just gives me ideas. So this deck gives me ideas on how to create ritual to manifest. So that's how I use this deck. I don't use this deck for a 1-card draw. I don't use it to lay in spreads or for clarification. It doesn't mean you can't. In fact, I'm sure the book probably gives you ideas for spreads. They almost always do. Maybe this one doesn't. And I have the big book, and they're basically the same. The big book is just bigger, nicer. The words are bigger. It's easier for me to read. But I think they're pretty much word for word, so you don't need the big book. This one doesn't actually, but you could still use this in spread for divination. I just don't find a way to do that easily, so that's not how I use it. I have a specific reason I bought it and a specific way I use that one. This deck is Witches of Legend. I do pull a card out of here sometimes. Sometimes I will shuffle and pull a card when I'm wondering what type of energy or characteristics that I need to be working on manifesting for a certain situation. I'll pull it and I'll read up on that goddess or witch. For me, they are archetypes that help us know how to deal with certain situations. So I will use it for that. I will also use them for altar cards. So that's the two ways I use this deck. Again, I don't use this deck in spreads. I don't use it for divination. Let's see if the book gives us ways that we can do that. It does. So the guidebook tells you like who you've been, who you are, who you need. And that's actually really nice. Then actually looking at that, maybe I will use it that way. A lot of times the creators will, and oracle decks will tell you how they meant for their deck to be used. That doesn't mean you're locked into using it that way. Once you've bought it, it's yours. But they'll give you some ideas. It may expand how you think about it. It might expand your practice. It might expand your mind. I have a couple of decks that actually have rooms for personal notes. I don't normally write personal notes in here. If I do that, I'll do that in my journal. That way the book remains pristine. I can use the cards over and over, knowing that they may mean different things, and I may have different thoughts at different times in my life. So I tend not to write in these books. So that's how I would use this oracle. This oracle I love. It has little books that go like storybooks that tell you about the characters in here and their stories. I love that. I've read the storybook that goes along with it. I tend to pull these for a 1-card draw when I need help on what I should be focusing on. And I do that with this deck because the meanings of the cards tend to be written to me in like kind of like parables, it feels like. So there's like a story, and the story has a point to it. And so when I read these things, that I read the story, and because I've read the storybooks, the stories are really good for me. I really like them. I think you could enjoy this deck without reading the storybooks though too. But I read the story and I find the meaning in the parable and how that relates to me and how I can incorporate that in my own life. And so I really like this deck for journaling and 1-card draws. This is one of my favorite journaling decks. It has been since I bought it. It also can be used in spreads. Yes, they have spreads in here. Things to focus on, making inquiries, defining situations. So you can use it that way. I don't normally. I do sometimes use this. I use it mostly for 1-card draws before bedtime. This is more of a bedtime deck. I don't know if it's because of the colors in it. I don't know how well that is showing up. Maybe I need to, my light is changing, so I might need to adjust my lamps so that these cards show up better, because they do have, they are very pretty. And I find I can see them much better in person than I think I can on camera. There's scenes behind here, like mountains and clouds and different things, just depending. Looks like a little waterfall on that one. I mean, this definitely looks like teeth. So I will use this normally before I go to bed. as a way to focus my dreams on problem solving. Normally, I find my dreams try to marry my subconscious and my conscious mind together often and help me try to solve problems that I have been having a difficult time with, or that I've been avoiding, and my brain is tired of me trying to avoid them. Sorry, there's somebody gunning their car, revving their engine outside. So I use this deck for that. I will journal with it. I will journal what my dreams were around it, how they interacted with each other. The other way I use this deck is if I have done a tarot reading that's been particularly difficult, and I've been told what to do, and I'm finding a hard way of changing my thought pattern or habits, or hard time accepting my answer, I will use this deck for guidance to kind of help move me in the right direction. It'll be like my little advice deck. This is like my little wise man on the mountain, this deck is. I go to it for sage advice. It does under each card. Okay, so I was talking about this deck. It has different sections of the cards. And a lot of them will tell you like an animal and a plant and a crystal that you can use to work with that card if you're doing meditation or journaling work with it. They ask questions in here. Like, it's not always like at the end, but in here somewhere it asks questions or asks you to think about certain things. And I do love oracle decks that do that the guidebook has some like self-reflection, because it makes them easier to journal with, in my opinion. Easier for me to journal with. There we go. So, so this is one of my journaling decks. So, this is a journaling deck. This is a journaling deck. So this is the deck that I know that Jenny just bought. I think it was a Samhain one. So there are 3 of these decks out already. Samhain was the first one, and then they did Yule and Beltane. Is it Beltane? I think. And they're doing more. They're doing more of the holidays from the Wheel of the Year. But so this deck in particular, I do love this deck. I can do a tarot deck that has no guidebook whatsoever. That doesn't bother me. Like, I think guidebooks are interesting if the creator wants to put down like their rationalization and of their symbology and how they got to the images they got. But if it's a RWS deck, if it's meant to be in that system, I don't need a guidebook. But for oracle decks, the guidebook to me is just as important as the cards, because they don't all have the same meanings, and because each deck is different. So this deck has quite a bit of like the meanings in it. It has keywords. It has upright and reverse meanings, and it just has things that you can think about in order for you to be able to journal with it. So I do journal with this deck. I do use this deck in readings sometimes. I'll use oracles to ask like clarifications of the basis of the issue. I use them in that way for divination, but I do use a lot of oracle to journal with. I use tarot to journal with. I journal. It's something I do. But, so this video is probably already getting pretty long, and I think I've answered most of the questions about tarot and oracle that were given to me. So I just need to do questions about journaling, and then this one final question that I wanted to leave for last. So journaling. I like to journal. I'm a fountain pen geek, and I journal with fountain pens and different color inks. I'm like, I don't really want to open my journal here and like have people to be able to stop and read it. But I have a couple of ways I journal. Sometimes I'll look through the cards for keywords that call out to me in the moment. And I will look at the card, and I will journal about how it makes me feel. Like, I'll just sit with it like its own piece of artwork. Like I'm sitting at a museum looking at a piece of artwork and thinking about what is it that I like about it? What is that I find disturbing? Is it the way the light and shadows play? Is it perspective? Is it the theme? Is it the art style? Like, I'll sit there with it for a while and I'll think about the aesthetics of the card. Then I'll start thinking about, what does this card make me think of? And if I'm having a hard time, what I'll do is, like in a card like this, I'll be like, okay, if I was this person, like, what would I be doing there? What's happening? What's going on? How would I be feeling in that moment? And then I'll relate to, when in my life did I feel that way? When in my life did I have a moment that gave me that type of thought process? So this is an example. So for this card, the underworld is what it's called. And I think we're able to see it well. And it says, hand over your known, a shift is near, take a leap, your journey is clear. So to me, this is talking about transitions, and because of the aesthetic of the card, it's moonlight, it's dark, they are all dressed very similar. It has an aspect of ritual and secrecy, which almost makes me feel like initiation. It makes me feel like transitions that had to be taken in the middle of the night. This makes me think of my sisters. My sisters. It makes me think of having to move people out of an apartment in the middle of the night for their own safety. It makes me feel like the times that we've had to rally together to help each other out. And those are always in times of distress. So this card, it might not make you feel distress, and in that perspective, it makes me think of a time of distress where you needed your sisters in order to help you move from one place to another. And it might have been dark, but with your sisters there, you have enough moonlight to kind of see where you're going. Maybe not far ahead, but enough steps ahead that you're not faltering, that somebody else is steadying you. Also makes me think of my sorority days in college and initiation for sorority. And again, it makes me think of sisterhood here, and being led into more knowledge or more information, into a new community, into new relationships. So, I mean, it has all these different connotations, and then I can journal about those experiences and what were the positives of those experiences and what were the negatives of those experiences and what have I learned from them? What did I learn about myself and about how I reacted? Why did I need that kind of help? did I feel supported by that help? How would that look like now in those situations with the things I've learned? How would I react to it differently? What kind of help would I need now? How would it look different? And those are kind of things like, when you start down those paths, you're like, oh, was I a person who, when things got tough, I just like threw up my arms like I was drowning and somebody else had to pick me up? And am I that person now? Or have I changed roles? Am I not the middle person who's being guided anymore? Am I a person on the end now who guides? You know, you can kind of go all different directions with your journaling. When a card has hit a lot of layers, I will often put it on a stand. Like I have this card on a stand right now. This is from the Nameless Ones. So this is also a Rider-Waite-Smith. Totally different look. Not Pip. Not really scenic. It's a sigil deck. It's kind of its own thing, but you can read it like a Rider-Waite-Smith. But anyways, I'll put a card on a stand. I'll put it on my desk. I'll leave it there for a while, so that every time I sit down, I can continue to journal about it, continue to think about it, until I feel like I have explored it enough for now. It doesn't mean it won't come up later. It certainly doesn't mean if it comes up later, it won't signify something different depending upon what's going on in my life at that point. So that is how I journal with Oracle. When I journal, I tend to color code my journals. Oracles, when I'm writing about Oracle cards, they have a specific color. It's like a teal. When I journal about dreams, it tends to have purple. And then when I journal with tarot, my majors are pink, my wands are red, my cups are blue. No, my cups are silver. My swords are blue, and my pentacles are green. Sometimes I make cups gold, because I think a metal chalice, either silver chalice, gold chalice. So it just depends upon what color I have at the point in a pen. But I'll journal in those colors. I did do a journaling activity with tarot. I bought a book. I don't know if I still have it. I don't have it right over here. It's on my bookshelf. I went through an entire tarot deck with it, and I decided to shift away and do some different type of journaling, and I'll probably shift back to it because it's a huge book. It's called Taroting the Journal, Evolutions, I think is what it's called. If you look for it on the internet, you'll find the author says Andy Matzer. The author is now living their true self and going, has adopted the new name of Drea, I want to say Bloom. I'll have to look and make sure. I'll put that information down below. So these are how I journal, and differences between tarot and oracle and how I journal. So one other question, we'll turn it face right and make sure I've covered all the questions and answered them. Give me just a minute. Okay, so you can see I'm different clothes, finishing this video up on a different day. So the 3 questions that I think I answered when we were top down for the oracle cards, but I just want to make sure, were what is the best practice purpose of journaling with them? So I kind of already went over the way and reasons I journal with cards, whether it's tarot or whether it's oracle. It is so that I can do some self-exploration and look at habits and how I've reacted to things in the past, and kind of tear that down into a point of, was it healthy? Was it good for me? Is there lessons I've learned? Is there a better way to do that in the future? So hopefully I don't have to keep making the same mistakes over and over again in my life. And it kind of helps me also explore anger issues. And I find that when I journal and get those on paper, then I'm keeping less inside. And anger can be good, but it's not good for it to live inside. So get it out. The other question was, do you write what the cards mean to you? Sometimes I do. When I'm writing, and sometimes I journal with a new deck. I'm more likely to do this with tarot than oracle, but I will do the cards one by one. If the imagery is different than what I'm used to, and I will journal what I'm seeing, what intuitively I feel like that card is telling me. And I'll do that before I read the guidebook or before I do anything else. And then I'll read the guidebook and see what the creator or artist kind of had in mind for that card, that image. And then I'll write that down, and then I'll marry those two to see, like, what was I missing? Why did I miss that? Do I view it the same way the artist creator viewed it, or do I view it differently? What do I want to take away from that? And then I may journal about how all of those make me feel, or a time in my life that kind of that meaning embodied. So I will journal that way too. So the only other question I don't think that I have answered is, Jenny asked, have you developed any other powers because I use tarot oracle? I think I have developed a greater self-awareness. I don't know whether you want to call that a power, but I think in the world today that is a power. I think I have, it's helped me develop and cultivate new habits and new ways of interacting. And it has helped me have better boundaries in my life, both for what I give out and what I receive back. And I think that those are all super, super helpful for me. I think that it has made my observation skills a little bit better in some areas, although I do think I kind of turn that off and on when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I kind of go into like fade mode, and I'm not very observant. I think it's a protective thing when your mind's just had enough. But so do I think I'm more magical because I read tarot cards? No. Because I don't believe in fantasy magic. I believe magic is just your mind's ability to hone it, to develop it, to learn more, and to take things that we once thought were magic and have a good scientific explanation for them. So that's me. So this has been Ray at Drop of Golden Tarot, answering questions. If you like this video, please do a thumbs up, like, subscribe. But more importantly, if you have a different way that you use tarot oracle, a different way that you journal with them, and how you use them in your daily life or in your practice, please put comments below. I'm also going to put in the comments below some links to some YouTube creators that I think do a great job teaching, like especially tarot. So like Lisa Pepez used to be the Supportive Tarot. She has like the Tarot with Training Wheels. So if you're just starting to learn tarot, I think that she's got a great series of videos that are no cost that you can listen to. And then there's another one, Kelly Maddox, who has some beginner videos. And then there is, oh my gosh, why am I blanking the name? I'm blanking the name. I'll have it linked. I'm so sorry I'm blanking your name. But he has great videos on the court cards and how he sees the court cards, because I know a lot of people have a hard time with court cards, and it really helped me view court cards differently, not just as people. So I will put all of those links below so that you can go and explore. So if you're new to tarot or oracle, it'll give you some things to go look at and get more comfortable in your practice. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye-bye.